After abandoning me for 16 years, they want me to reconcile because they are having a baby. I told them they were the worst parents ever. Hi, this is my first time posting. I was born when my parents were very young. My mother was 16 and my father was 17. Both families decided it would be best for me if my maternal grandparents effectively raised me and my biological parents got to live their lives. That is not to say I didn't know who my actual parents were. This is not one of those situations like in movies where the mother pretends the daughter's child is actually her own. I and everyone knew who my progenitors were. My father moved away when he was 18, but my mother remained in my grandparents' house until she was 23, and I was around 7, but that doesn't mean we were close. She always treated me more like an annoying little brother than a son. She didn't like spending time with me, never attended any of my school functions, showed interest in my academic work, or took me to do any fun activities. Whenever I was talking about my day, she would roll her eyes or change the topic to shut me up. When she moved out, I barely saw her. She just came to family gatherings and said an awkward hi and did not even look at me. It hurt even if, by that point, I already considered my grandparents to be more my parents than her. My father was still living away, they weren't together at this point, but would come once or twice a year to visit his own family around the holidays, and always made it a point to visit me and take me to do some sort of fun activity like going to the cinema or my favorite restaurant, things like that. But to me, he was more like a strange man than a dad, because when I compared him to my friends' fathers who picked them up from school every day and went to their games and played with them on the weekends, I didn't understand why this man who I saw maybe twice a year was supposed to be the same. Anyway, fast forward to a year ago. My father moved back to the same city where we live. He tried to hang out with me more often, but I wasn't really interested, although sometimes I comply. I don't hate him, I just don't know him. I even had a bedroom in his apartment, which is cool because he lives in the center of the city. Behind everyone's back, both my parents had started hanging out, and a couple months later they announced they were dating. It was a shock. They asked me to move in with them to my father's apartment, which I refused, but they argued that we could finally be a family. I was about to start an argument with them when my grandma just said that changing school districts would be very inconvenient and I could lose all my friends, and the situation de-escalated by itself. Although my parents didn't let go of the idea. My parents asked for me to spend more time with them, and this was particularly frustrating because even though I never had any particular tension with my father, I most definitely do with my mother. I don't like being around her, and she's treated me poorly my whole life, and I feel like she's now only trying to save face because she knows my dad wants me there. Now onto the issue. Last week, they both came into my grandparents' house. They announced they were going to buy a house nearby in the neighborhood so that I could finally move in with them. I immediately said no, and when they said that changing schools would no longer be an issue, I found myself in a corner, and I said that was never the problem and that I just simply don't see them as my parents and don't want to live with them. That's when they dropped the bomb on us. Not only did they want me to move in with them so we could be a family, but my mother was pregnant, so we were going to be a bigger family. I was shocked, and I blew my lid on them. I told them they were the worst parents in the world and that they abandoned me for 16 years, and now they were going to bring another child into the world and do the same to them. And they never apologized for treating me like garbage and like a mistake they made, making me feel like I wasn't supposed to exist and dumping me as other people's responsibility. Only now that they feel like they care, they want to be my family. My mother screamed back at me, telling me I was a brat and that she wasn't going to make the same mistakes twice while raising her second baby. I told her she never raised me to begin with, and my father said that they were young and trying to do the best they could. Well, guess what the best you could do was? Pretty effing bad. I stormed out and went to my sobbing. I have been very depressed for the last week. They have both called and texted since, but I ignored them. My grandparents agree with me that I shouldn't move and that my parents shouldn't expect me to be all loving and forgiving after how they've treated me. However, they believe they are starting a new chapter of their lives now that they are more mature and stable, which I guess leaves me behind. I've also had time to think that I'm the same age my mother was when she had me, and what a huge responsibility that must have been. However, I still can't forgive them. Ada for the way I reacted to the news. Edit. Thank you everyone for the verdict of the NTA. I feel better, and it has somewhat cleared my mind. Also, a huge thank you to all that are commenting about how awesome my grandparents are. I'm planning on showing them this post so they can see how much everyone can see the amazing kind of people they are, and they deserve all the love and appreciation I could possibly give them and more. I've also come to the conclusion that I have a lot of resentments and unanswered questions, as well as misgivings about the future that I need to set straight with, primarily my father. He needs to know how I grew up and why he abandoned me. I also feel like I need to warn him about my mother, because I am worried about my sibling being abandoned and mistreated like I was. So I'm preparing a list of points and questions that I want to bring up to him, and we'll meet tomorrow or the day after, and I'll confront him with all of these to hopefully get some sort of closure or resolution. Verdict. NTA. Relevant comments. OP responds to a comment calling out his father. I'm starting to feel like there's a lot of things that I don't know about the time when I was born and why I was effectively abandoned, because my other set of grandparents paternal don't live far away, and I see them occasionally, but it's always more uncomfortable with them. They have other children and grandchildren, whereas my mother is an only child. So when I visit them, I feel like the odd one out because I'm usually alone in a big family environment. But about why my dad didn't reach out to me, I don't know, and I want to confront him about that. As far as I'm aware, when he was away, he didn't keep much contact with my mother either. This is just since he came back. That's why I feel like I need to talk with him and set things straight, because I feel so lost. OP on his father's proposal proposal of therapy. My father talked about getting us into family therapy a while ago, but I thought it was a stupid idea. Perhaps I should look into it for just myself. Perhaps with my grandparents too. OP reacts to the comments. I want to share this post with my grandparents because, honestly, the most common response has been how great they are. I love them so much, and I tell them all the time, but I feel like it's never enough, and it's always great to take the time to tell the people you are most grateful to how much you appreciate them and how much of an impact they have had in your life. Update. 3 days later. Hi everyone. Thank you all for the responses. It really helped a lot. It's been an emotional couple of days, and a lot has happened. My mind is a little bit dispersed, but I felt like I owed you all an update, and I'm trying to be as clear as possible. For those of you who didn't read my original post, the gist of it is basically that my 16-year-old parents had me when they were very young 16-year-old, 17-year-old, but they got separated and left me to be raised by my maternal grandparents. My mother was around but couldn't care less about me, but my dad went away, and we had very sporadic but positive contact. Now he's come back, they're back together, they're having a new baby, and they want me back into their lives. I refused and told them they're horrible and shouldn't have kids, which brings us to the original post. First of all, I shared my post with my grandparents, and they were so surprised by it. They were very happy to see how many people commented about how amazing they are, and I, in turn, also took the opportunity to tell them how much I loved them and how much I appreciated everything they had ever done for me. They are my real parents, and nothing is ever going to change that. There were some tears, and they told me they loved me and how proud they were of me. They never thought of themselves as doing something special or worth so much appreciation. They were just taking care of family, but they are the best. After that, I started trying to collect my thoughts and arranging a meeting with my father to discuss the things that were bothering me. Why did he abandon me? Why did he think he could just reappear in my life like that? That I wasn't going to move in with them, and I didn't consider them my parents because they never acted as such, etc. We met at a park, and he went to hug me, but I stepped away, and he looked hurt, and he just apologized for what happened the other day, and went into this speech about how we could try to transition into living together part-time and respecting my boundaries, and I went blank. I didn't expect him to talk, so I pulled out my phone and just showed him the post I made the other day, and he started reading it in silence. After a while, he read it all and some responses, and he just asked me if this was true, and I said yes, and he asked me if I had questions he would answer honestly. I asked what happened when I was born, and he told me that when my mother got pregnant, all options were laid on the table. Abortion, adoption, marriage, grandparents taking care of me, only one of my parents taking me in. My mother was deadly scared of adoption because some religious group had told them some horror story about dead babies and mothers being killers or something like that. So she wanted to give me up for adoption, but my father refused. He couldn't bear the idea of having his child live somewhere and never seeing him again. So he proposed to take me in as the sole caretaker and leave his college plans to stay in our city. But his parents weren't thrilled with this plan and pushed him to go to college so that he could provide economically for me. They offered themselves to take care of me, but they were significantly older than my maternal grandparents. She was the only child, and at the time they were just 40, whereas my father has 5 older siblings and his parents were already in their 60s. And since taking care of me meant taking care of my mother for a while as well, my maternal grandparents decided it was the best decision for them to take me. Also, intermediately after I was born, my mother had postnatal depression, and the doctors advised them not to completely remove them from her side or more damage to our relationship could be done. My grandparents wanted her to eventually love me as a son. One thing to note about my father that I didn't mention in my OP is that even when he was in college, he worked part-time to pay child support, and once he started working in a law firm, he started sending more money to my grandparents and set up a college fund for me, which was news for me. My grandparents don't know about this, but my mother does, so I don't know what to do with this information. My father thought of me all the time he spent away and believed he had left me with a happy family and that he was working to give me a better life, but I followed his life through social media. He went to parties, vacations, had girlfriends, and did lots of fun stuff and barely had any contact with me. I asked him why he couldn't have made more of an effort to be a part of my life. I understand if he needed to study in another city and work there, but it's no effort to call or text. Coming once a year just doesn't cut it. He looked ashamed and apologized to me, and I took the advice that I saw in a lot of the comments here that I would forgive but not forget, and that maybe we can build a relationship going forward, but it will always be marked by his actions in the past. If he hasn't been my dad for 16 years, he can't start now. He seemed sad but accepted my conditions. I then told him about my concerns about my mother, told him how badly he treated me as a child, that I did not think she would be a good mother for my sibling, and that I wanted to go out of contact with her. He said that after he left for college and they broke up, he would call her once in a while to check up on things, but that quickly ended, and when he came back, she explained to him that she and I had a great bond, and even though we didn't see each other daily, it was because I was in those teenage years, and that she loved spending time with me and had been a very hands-on mom. I told him that all that she said was a lie, and that she never cared for me. He obviously read the stuff from my post, but I also told him other things, like when she would ask my grandparents babysitting money for taking care of me, or that she would call me annoying or disgusting to my face when we still lived together, and that severely messed me up. He was very serious and said he would talk to her, but that he really would not allow a child to be treated like that, and that he was sorry for letting that happen to me. Lastly, he told me I would have a bedroom in his house, but he understood perfectly well that I would never live there. He was quite emotional emotional at this point and got chalked up at this point when he asked me if, even if I didn't consider him my father, I would consider his baby my sibling. I said of course that I planned to be a very active part of their lives if I could. He started crying and asked if he could hug me, and this time I agreed. I am happy about the resolution of our conversation, and I really do believe he will be a good parent for my sibling. Once again, thanks to everyone who commented and took an interest in my story. I don't know if I'll update again. Relevant comments. OP on the grandparents who raised him. It was hard for them, and I assure you, at every possible turn, they have taken my side, scolded my mother for her treatment towards me, and taken measures about it, even forcing her to go to therapy. They made it really clear to me, explicitly, that I was like a son to them, and they wouldn't choose her daughter over me, especially after seeing how she treated me, but it's hard for them because they love her. OP on his mother. We haven't heard from her since I talked to my dad. My grandparents are a little worried. Keep in mind, she is also her daughter, and all bridges cannot be burned. If she does something crazy, I'll update. Update 2. So, a lot of you warned me about the SHT hitting the fan, sort of speaking, when my biological mother talked with my dad, and today that's exactly what happened. My father sent me a text early in the morning, warning me about the fact that he was going to confront my mother, and that he didn't want anything to splash on me. He reassured me that he believed me completely, and I braced myself because I expected her to call me berating me or something. I truly don't care about what she thinks, but these past few days have been emotionally draining, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for another full-blown confrontation. Using Reddit to bend has been helpful though. After a few of ours, my mother pulled into our house and let herself in, screaming like mad and calling me every name in the book, saying I had ruined her relationship and asking me why had I been blabbing about private matters that don't concern anybody. I said that my childhood matters to me and my father, who is also going to be the future father of her child, and that her actions ruined their relationship. She called me an arsehole and said I was the biggest effing mistake she's ever done in her life. I didn't know she could still hurt me, but that was a low blow, and I said that I would do anything in my power to take her baby away from her because she was a monster of a mother. We were screaming at this point, and my grandparents, who were in the backyard, must have heard us. They entered the room, separated us, and heard part of the fight. I was fighting tears, and my grandma walked me upstairs to my room as my grandpa screamed to my mother how she dared speak to me that way. My grandma soothed me a little and then went to confront my mother with my grandpa. I heard from the door how they ripped my mother a new one. They confronted her for telling me the things that she did, for treating me like garbage all my life, and for lying to my father. They told her how disappointed they were in her for always treating me with disgust, and how many excuses they made for her, thinking she was a child trying to raise a child, but she was now an adult, and her behavior continued the same, and they said they were on the path of disinheriting her. My mother was screaming about how hard it had been for her, and how much she hurt, but my grandparents were having none of that. They raised me, and she was allowed to have the life she wanted, and to take all the decisions she wanted without repercussions ever. And I even heard them say that if any custody battle ensued over the baby to come, they would take the father's side, unless she radically changed everything about her behavior. They went outside for a while, so I don't know what they said, but eventually they came into my room, and my grandparents looked extremely serious, and my mother was red and crying and apologized to me through gritted teeth. I didn't respond, but my grandparents said on her behalf that she was going to start therapy immediately, and that she was no longer welcome in the house. I called my father after the debacle, and he was furious. He talked to my mother before going to a work meeting or something, and he confronted her about everything. Apparently, it was nasty, but he was willing to work on the relationship for the good of the baby on the condition that my mother would also be working on improving her relationship with me, so that whenever I visited them, I wouldn't feel uncomfortable. After he left, he made her promise she wouldn't contact me until they talked again. But there's my mother for you guys. I asked him to think about what's best for himself and the baby, and to not hold today against my mother if he didn't want to. Also, a thing that has come up a lot in the comments of my previous posts is that my progenitors only want me as a babysitter, and that I should steer away from them and my baby for my own sake. But I want to make a point about that. I can't say anything about their intentions. I know nothing about that, but I am really very excited to have a sibling. Growing up, I had a very small family. It was just my grandparents and me. On my paternal side, I had a huge family with aunts, uncles, and cousins, but whenever I went there, I always felt like the odd one out. They tried to include me and invited me for Easter, Christmas, BBQs, and stuff, but I didn't really know them, and although they were nice, I always felt like I had a big sign on my head that said, "That kid John had in high school." I can't wait to have a sibling to love them, to always be there for them, and to show them what a family is. I want to be that person they can always rely on for them, and I want to feel that bond with someone. So even if I have my misgivings about my parents, and I do a lot, I do not want to be a big brother. I hope this is the last update and there is no more family drama in the future. Thank you all for all your help. Having this site to air out my frustrations and having a community to back me up and give me feedback has been amazing, and you truly have helped me out a lot to deal with all of this, so really thank you so much. Update 3. Hi everyone. I posted a few months ago about my situation, and I just saw someone put my story on TikTok, so I checked back on this account and saw that I still had some notifications asking for an update, so here it is. Well, first of all, my grandparents are as cool as ever. I have not moved, nor do I intend to, and we spent Christmas together. It was all great. My father and I have bonded more, and we are in a better place. He is paying for my therapy, and we've done a couple of sessions together, and we're in a much better place. He feels sorry for having lost my childhood years, but understands that I cannot get them back. And instead of pushing a relationship with me, he is letting me have my space to build as much of a relationship that I want with him, which takes the pressure off of me. We've kind of bonded over my little sister. We found out she's going to be a girl, and I helped him paint the nursery and build the furniture, which I enjoyed a lot. He and my egg donor are in a bit of a weird situation. They live together, but they're not together. My father is extremely angry about everything that she did and said to me when I was little, and what I related in my previous post. And he is weary about what kind of person she really is going to be with my baby sister. They are going to couples therapy and individual therapy, and although I see her passing because I go sometimes to my father's house, she is just barely polite with me, and I can tell she feels like I'm the one who screwed up her opportunity to play house with her second baby. I try to pay her no mind, but the only thing that worries me is if she eventually is going to poison my little sister's mind against me, or subject her to a similar mistreatment like she did to me, because she is also going to be born around all this tension. The silver lining is that everyone else is showing up for my little sister, and that means I've also connected much more with my father's side of the family. They've always been kind to me, but I always felt weird around them. But now that things with my father seem to be settling into a more comfortable way, I feel like I belong more to his family and can hang out with my cousins, aunts, and uncles more. Sorry if it's not much of an update, but here's how things are at the moment. Thank you for watching the video.